5 years after the 2020 general and regional elections were held here in Guyana, there's still a very important question that has to be answered. And that question has to do with the involvement of a number of persons, the alleged involvement of a number of persons in the attempted rigging process of the 2020 election. If you ask me, I would say maybe that we're in a game of fives. 5 months between the commencement of the election process in March 2020 to the conclusion in August 2020. But now we are 5 years from March 2020 coming forward, and still the court matter has not been brought to conclusion. I'm Derwin Wills, and I'm joined by the Honorable Robeson Benn, Minister of Home Affairs. But he won't be sitting here in his capacity as Home Affairs at this point, because Minister Benn was very instrumental in the elections process. But I will ask him to take us back a little bit, even before the election, to December 2018, and what happened that really brought us to that point of March 2020.
Yes, well, thank you, Doreen, and good night to your listeners, our listeners. I think I've been moved to come here because of what we see unfolding in sections of the media with respect to what went on in the elections. There's a process going on, and there are reports in the media from the courts, and we seem to be in a catch-22 situation on the one hand, and maybe a deja vu for me, listening or reading, or as early perhaps as yet, what the presentations are with respect to those elections. We might recall that we had a no confidence vote. There was a requirement constitutionally to hold an elections at just thereafter. Elections were not held, they were delayed. We didn't get to the point of elections until 2020, March. We went into the elections, which went through fairly peaceably, and somehow, in spite of the good behavior of the vast majority of the Guyanese people, in terms of going and making their presentations, in terms of political messaging, but also in terms of putting their votes, voting for their representatives for the parties of their choice. We went in to trouble when there was a question of tabulating and counting the results. It was clear to some of us, and I was already sitting there as a member of the Guyana Elections Commission for the People's Progressive Party Civic, that there were signs, clear signs that there would be attempts, that there were moves afoot to thwart the will of the Guyanese people, the democratic will of the Guyanese people. It was obvious to us for a while, sitting there, and for myself, along with Sis Conraj, and now this is Baby Shidika as commissioners for the PPP Civic, that the efforts they were making in terms of the process and in terms of body language and behavior, that we had to be extremely vigilant in terms of making sure that we had a clear democratic process. And so we had a thorough time all along the way at meetings with respect to how these elections would have been taking place. You know, we had a chairman elected, the midnight chairman, I think some of us would say, who arrived with his pajamas, some of us have said, and that we had a big fight to have the illegal appointment of the chairman of the Guyanese Elections Commission to have forced his resignation. When it was declared, when it was said that his appointment was illegal, and not by us simply here, but by the CCJ. So we were on this rugged road with respect to getting to a point where we would have been satisfied that the elections would have been done democratically and positively and safely. But we had the country terms in the finally when all the results were coming in at the Ashman's building, where there were the clear attempts, repeated, deliberate, nefarious attempts to thwart the will of the Guyanese people, the democratic will. And so, if we recall anything about those days, one may recall the questions of the returning officer suddenly appearing to be ill and being rolled out in a wheelchair. And when he was checked at the Georgetown Hospital, it was discovered that he was not ill. There were the questions of making the new chair of the Guyanese Elections Commission unavailable. We had those issues, and there was a little uproar about that. We had the issues of bomb scares, and I remember sitting at the table when we were signing off the SOPs which were coming in, which we had decided that we would sign up, authenticate, myself and Bibi Shadik and some others. Some on the other sides were getting up to see or to whisper and speak aside, and we knew that something was afoot. And then we knew that there was said to be a bomb scare. And myself and Bibi Shadik said, well, let the bomb go off. There's no bomb scare. They brought in the dogs, they brought in the police, the bomb squad experts, and so on. Well, we said, well, if there's a bomb here with all the security and everything, it might as well go off. We continued to sign. And we then had the later uproar that evening and the next day and the next few days, 3 days, in relation to this matter. The fact of the matter is that the issues related to what went on were fully ventilated, were seen, and are recorded in audio and video in the from the Ashman's building. At the back of the building, when an attempt was made to to restart the RECOM process, and also where the bed sheet was put up at the Elections Commission headquarters. They were observers, international observers from the Commonwealth, from the Caribbean, CARICOM, all over. Independent observers who came, and pronouncements were made as to what was on the foot, what was happening, and that there was no credibility to what was happening at the Ashman's building and later at the Guyanese Elections Commission headquarters. There were a number of resorts thereafter, and well, you know, there was a decision that there would be a RECOM, and a
Correct.
team was established to do the RECOM. And that process, after a bit of time, went through to the convention center. We had issues at the convention center where there were efforts to not have the containers in which the ballot boxes were secured, under watch, under surveillance from informed independent parties and also from the parties themselves.
Where were those concerns coming from?
They were coming from all over. They were coming from from our side, the PPP Civic. They were coming from ourselves as commissioners, and they were independent observers and interest groups who wanted to make sure that nothing untoward would happen, because there was the thought again that the final effort would have to come if one continued along the pathway of rigging for the election, that you had to get into the containers where the boxes were sealed. And there was an issue, I won't go into my little part in it, but the recount went ahead.
Before we continue with the recount, I want to take us back a little bit to something. We're at Ashman's building, and if we read some of the reports now that surround the coverage of this court matter, for example. You know, statements are made by the attorneys for the political for persons who are accused. Sometimes you get the impression that the only entity, the only partner that had an issue with anything that was happening was the PPC. It's almost as though, the reason why I say that is I want to bring out what was said in the CARICOM report, allegations without evidence. And this is in relation to what was happening. With absolutely no evidence to substantiate the allegations, this was often the source of major contention in the workstations, as all other political parties objected to the allegations raised by the APNU AFC agents.
That is true.
Was it only... So that's why I'm saying it appears as though from the statements that are being made, like if it's only the PP that was making any concerns and raising anything.
All the other parties raised objections as to the process, who was doing what, how it was being done. And I would say that we work very well together with the representatives of the other parties. So that is absolutely not true. I would say in totality, again, there's an attempt to mischaracterize what actually went on. I would say again, and in totality, that those who are under review by our court in respect of this matter, or these matters anyway, that perhaps they should think about making a deal, that they should think about doing a plea bargain, that their malfeasance, crimes, whatever you want to put it, whatever they're being examined for. And I refer to the point again that it's on record, it's in statements, it's in visual or record, audio record, persons saw it, persons experienced it. So I'm not sure why is this relentless attempt to continue on this pathway of denial of what what the world saw. We were live, we're in a new era, a new digital era where everything that you do goes out there, and you have reports from all over the world in respect of what was happening, other than what we know what happened here. So I don't know why they want to continue to tilt at Will Mills, to use a phrase, or to continue to. The difficulty with this is that they hope perhaps that people have short memories otherwise. They perhaps hope that they could get some persons energized around political partisan issues, not on the strength of what occurred in relation to the incident or a series of incidents, but they will perhaps want to whip up a further and to confuse or kerfuffle, to use a Guyanese term, in respect of these matters. The facts of the matter are there, were laid bare. There was a commission of inquiry set up. Issues went to the CCJ, the highest court for ourselves in the CARICOM grouping, and the matters, each and every matter which was brought there, went the way that we said that should happen, that everybody saw and knew that it should happen. Why would we want to now to contest the decisions of the CCJ and the evidence of our own eyes, the evidence of the observer reports, international and local and regional observers? Why would you want to continue along this pathway? So it is true that everyone wants to see justice done and justice served, and those who were wrapped up in wrongdoings should by now acknowledge that. The questions, issues, we know of where some persons were rewarded somehow before perhaps the actual incident for going along the pathway which they undertook in respect of these matters. The issues of land being given to persons and other things. So this determined attempt to continue to think that the Guyanese people, on all sides of this matter, because I'm sure that the members of the parties on all sides know and understand what happened and have accepted the defeat or the win, one way or the other. The mass of the Guyanese people, some may not want to speak of it, but most people acknowledge on all sides, almost all, that this is what occurred. It was bad, terrible. It's an embarrassment to the country, but set that aside and let us move forward. Don't put at risk our democracy. Don't put our country, and particularly now when we have a new renewed challenge from the Maduroistas in Venezuela in respect of Essequibo, that those are the challenges we have to focus on. That this business which occurred then needs to be dealt with in the courts, set aside, find the right sanctions under the law so that they don't reoccur, and that we learn from the experience, that we guard against this type of experience, because from 68, until there was a change in 92, the country and everyone suffered as a result of the electoral malpractices. And those two, that information too, for every election from 68 to until there was a change in 92, they are well recorded. They are historically recorded. They're in film, they're in writings. People know that they happened in their communities. And we are at the point where I think we have to consider that we are at a fork in the road in respect to this matter. And that people may want us to go back the lonely, despicable road of accepting, turning a blind eye to electoral fraud and rigging, and to putting us in a situation which, even now when we have the most momentous opportunity for development in our country, that we would backslide and we would fall into disarray, and that we will not allow for ourselves and our children, the next generation, a better life than we have had. We cannot go back to those days of rigging and electoral fraud.
And the PPP has brought a number of measures,
We have brought
amending the laws and so
we
on.
have amended the laws. We've worked at these issues. We have looked for partnership along these lines. Unhappily, that hasn't happened yet in the way we would want it to happen. But there are some forces, some interests who, for whatever reasons, some may say it's vicarious, some might say it's for expediency, simply, politically, of course. Some may say that they want to hold on to interest groups, political interest groups. Some may say that they have vote banks, which they've had over the years, and they want to keep them locked in relation to the leadership they want to put on the people in communities. But fundamentally, if we don't have democratic practices, if we don't have democratic elections in Guyana, which is a multiracial, multicultural, multireligious country, if we don't have the unity which we look forward to, which we work towards, in spite of all the other things, we would be weaker. We would not enjoy the benefits of the economic developments and opportunities which are out there begging for us to pay more attention to. And we'll be exposed to the machinations of the Venezuelans, the Maduristas, and others who would want to take advantage of us hurting ourselves and putting ourselves in a weaker space. The world is riskier these days in the question of electoral issues, on the question of cross-border problems in various parts of the world, Europe, Africa, other places. There's a question of how people in their own countries come together whether we recognize important issues, particularly for a country like Guyana, of diversity, equity, inclusivity, those issues. Uh, we cannot continue to put ourselves at risk with respect to this matter. We have to clear the road ahead. We have to pay attention to what we have to leave to the next generation. We will not succeed, we not make efficacious our opportunity that we have now. It is our responsibility. We have to make sure that we protect democracy. We have to make sure that we protect each other. We have to make sure that we respect and love even each other. I've been saying recently to some people at some meetings that that for some of us, many of us, if we were to go and do our DNA analysis, some of us who behave badly will run out of the room. That sometimes we don't acknowledge or know who we are really, and that in many ways it may be a conflicted, complex history of coming together as a Guyanese people, but that we have more to like about each other, and we know more about each other than in many other countries of the world. That people come to this country and are surprised at how we get along otherwise. That we board each other, we go to the same schools, same school benches, we go to the hospitals, we go to the same burial grounds, we know each other, we're school friends, and we are relations, relatives, and so on. So to continue on this path, which some people want to perhaps take us back to bad memories, we need to clear the way, clear the air ahead. And the facts are out there. And those facts, as they stand, are uncompromising in their validity, in the memory and the knowledge of the people, in the records of the courts, in the records of the Guyana Elections Commission, in the records of the observers and all of those who came here, nationally, regionally, in respect of this. And also, too, with respect of the observers.
I was going to bring that up.
Yeah, it is sad that it is being swung around to perhaps make the observers victims of what of their impartiality in the process. I know lawyers have to defend, and lawyers have to make representation for clients. And when it comes to political issues, perhaps the degrees of freedom which they will attempt to take may not be valid, but they'll attempt to take them anyway. But there's a time when lawyers have to give their clients the right advice and proper advice, and to make the space and the relationship going forward safer and clearer. And so I think it's despicable what is being said and represented in the media, some sections of the media in respect to what is being put forward to observers and others who were there and experienced the process and were hurt emotionally, traumatized. I think all of us were somewhat traumatized by the experience. That the position they're trying to force these persons into is not right, is not correct, even for a politically charged process such as this. It wouldn't stand the test of time. It wouldn't stand the test of other courts, as we've experienced before, of higher courts. It wouldn't stand the test of time in the memory and knowledge of people. And Guyanese on all sides are aware of this.
We have persons who are now coming into voting age. They're now part of the voting population. I guess that's why we continue to repeat these particular stories, so that persons understand how far we have come from.
Yes, but I think part of the effort in some sections of the media, and for some perhaps represented in the courts, would want to hope and think that amongst the next cohort of persons coming into voting age for the next elections, that they will be sufficiently confused, not understanding, maybe think that they look at the cell phone too much and don't pay enough attention to, serious reading. But I think they'll be badly mistaken. People know enough of what has happened. There is more than enough information out there. You could Google it. You could get the actionable and knowledgeable intelligence from your parents, from your friends, from your seniors. You could read it. And you could even try artificial intelligence to tell you what happened. If we go, I don't normally like to talk about artificial intelligence. I like actionable intelligence, but if I have to go to ChatGPT or what other things they use to mine the data and give you information and write things to you, give you information, you could go to artificial intelligence and they will tell you what happened. Anyone could try that. Any person could try that.
I think there have been some statements floating around that the system for the election system in Guyana, in terms of how we do our elections and so on, is a particularly strong system. But we see that there's a lot of attempts, these efforts to challenge the strength of that system.
Yes.
You were working on the inside. How do you challenge something like that?
Well, I don't. That is where the disappointment is. That is where the activities are being challenged on the basis of criminality. Because you're working inside, you have appointments to do things. The laws and the regulations and the practices and everything are the discussions and the directions which you're being given. And now you find yourself charged criminally with respect to the matter. For me, it's overly, it is a disappointment. And sometimes, personally, when you would have interacted with some of these people at the Guyana Elections Commission meetings, but as we went along the pathway, it was not unexpected that the attempts would have been made. And that the very characters who are being examined now are the same ones who, based on their behavior and their responses and actions that we saw from time to time, it's not unsurprising that those very people, along with some others who, when the conch was on, showed up doing things, altering information in the computer at night, coming through the back door at the building, at the Ashman's building, and then bringing the police and others in to try to get us out of the place, chasing us out and so on, terrorizing us. It's not unsurprising when you look at the numbers of persons and those particular persons who are charged in many ways, in my view, but of course we'll have to wait to the court and hear what the court says, and sometimes the court surprises us, and we've not been unsurprised by the courts. In many ways, if we look back with some of these issues over the years in respect of elections, but there's perhaps a hope that the younger generation will not pay enough attention to it. But as I said, we know what occurred. The younger persons and the older ones too, who may be challenged by these things, could go into the information technology sites and get the right information with respect to the matter, and to bring us to a point where we have closure. Because we need, this is an attempt to have closure. I would be happy if we get closure with this process, with this traumatic event, series of them, here in Guyana at the courts, and that we don't have to go any place further to get anything done about it. The country needs closure, and the court process is intended to have us have closure. It is the right of any person charged to have representation, to have defense, and so on. But of course, like in any process, and under the examination of the judges and others, that it has to make good sense, and it has to be backed up by what is out there not only in cyberspace, but also in documentation, in actions, in statements, in recollections, and all of those things, bolstered by by the examination on the witness stands, that we need closure. We need to have closure. We need to move on.
And on that message of closure, Minister Benn, I want to say thank you for taking the time to sit with us, to have this conversation. Very important information, of course. It's always important to bring these things back into the public consciousness so that people know, like I said before, where we started from, the path that we took, how we got here, and where we're looking to go into the future. And I want to thank all of the persons who joined us for this conversation.